Hello, happy Tuesday, everybody. It is my pleasure to be with all of you in one of our office hours for today. So, if you don't know who I am, my name is Maria Marquis. Here at Coda, I focus on customer education, empowerment, and in general, just celebrating our makers and nerding out on how we can all get a little bit better at Coda. So, lucky for all of you, I'm joined by my fabulous colleague, John. John, do you want to introduce yourself to the group here today? Oh, looks like she's going to be reconnecting. Never mind. I'll just hold then for a little bit there. Excellent. So it looks like we have a pretty small group here today, but what John and I wanted to do is to just take a little bit of time to answer any and all questions that you have about knowledge hubs that you're trying to build. So if you want to get some advice, if you're stuck on something, if you need some assistance, now is the time. This is just an open office hour. If you have questions, you can go ahead, put them over there on the left side of the screen, or you can also just click on the Ask a Question button on the bottom of the screen. That will also work. You're more than welcome to use that at any time. So please feel free, just put whatever you've got there on your minds. So while I give you a little bit of time here to gather your thoughts, hey there, John, you're back. I missed you.
Hey.
Do you want to introduce yourself to the group? I was just vamping a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is John Scroggum. I've been at Coda for a little over 2 years, but I was actually a long-time user before joining the team. So I was watching all Maria's webinars for about a year before I joined the side. And I've been building a bunch of knowledge hubs, so like wikis and guides and playbooks with clients all really started this past summer, starting to uptick. So excited to help all the clients out.
Also, John, I had totally forgotten that we had talked to each other as me as Coda person, you as user for like a year before we started working together. So funny how time flies. Awesome. So everybody, like I said, please do let us know what questions you have. Go ahead, put them over in chat along the right side of your screen or the Ask a Question button along the bottom. And while we're waiting for folks to gather thoughts, I thought it might be helpful, John, for us to show off some of the knowledge hubs that we were chatting about over the last couple of weeks, just to give people some ideas. Again, now is the time. John and I, our only job today is to make sure you leave with your questions answered. So let us know what we can do to support you. All right, I'm just going to just share my screen here really quickly. John, if you would just let me know when you can see it, that would be fabulous.
Looking good.
All right, fab, excellent. So what I like about the knowledge hubs that we were looking at the last couple weeks, John, or maybe just last week, I don't know, time flies, is that really there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's no one way that you need to construct a knowledge hub, right? It's not first this and then this and then this. And if you don't have X, Y, and Z, it's not good, right? It's all about how do we really support people working in their own way to find the solution that's going to be right for them. So this can take the flavor of what we see over here. This is from Anna Kellyan. What I like about this is it's really a kind of like documentation meets processes. She's documented every single thing that her team does as far as the best practices, how the team actually works, and also the tools that they use. I also like that she's got a whole bunch of things about policies. So a lot of kind of employee handbook things here as well. But where this really shines for me is this product knowledge base, which is very much like documentation. So what she's done is she's taken for every product, having an about, feature guide, feature FAQs, and then issues. And something I think that she's done is really creative here is really paid attention to the icons that she's using. So by using the icons tool that's part of Coda, you can just choose whatever you like, but she's actually created kind of a standardized logic here. So everything that's an about has this icon, everything that's a guide has this icon. So she's really used that one feature to really apply it in a lot of different ways. So John, if you think about kind of this particular approach to knowledge hubs, oh, thanks, John, for posting the link there. When you think about folks developing their own documentation or kind of thinking about the process documentation aspect of how they work together, what are some of the things that you see make people really successful when they're starting to embark on something like this?
So in this one in particular, it was an interesting conversation that we had back and forth because Anna could have taken I want to structure it as more of like a traditional like knowledge base, like a database, and have it as a table versus having it more as these like nested pages with guides and features. So I remember very early on that the knowledge base was basically the start of this doc was like, should it be in a table or should we have it as different pages that are all like nested and embedded?
Yeah. And I think that's a really important distinction for folks to make, right? Like, how do I want to structure this information? Do I want to do it more casually with text and headers and fonts and kind of more of a table of contents, or do I want to create a true structured database, which is really like a key question there. And if I think about kind of my perspectives, and I'd be curious what you think about this too, John, is that it really can go either way. It kind of starts with, what are your people really used to, right? Do they really respond well to text, or do they respond well to more of a spreadsheet type of situation? So there's definitely like the preference aspect, but it also strikes me as the other key decision making here is, how are you going to use that information, right? Do I need to use that data in multiple places? If that's the case, a table might make more sense because you can then reference it elsewhere. But John, how do you think about kind of making that decision, or how did you walk Anna through that? I'd really be curious to learn from you there.
Yeah, it's like this age-old question of once you outgrow your table, do you try to like augment the table and review it, or is it time to like make the hard transition to move it over into pages? So it's funny. I was expecting to have a product knowledge base of a table with like column name, that's the product, and then description, that's like another column, and kind of goes on, maybe like images or other columns. And that's how this started and how a lot of mine started. And I think once we had like enough details for each of the product sections, like, okay, it's time to like break the row as an article format and just start moving it into other pages. So I usually start as tables actually, or like an outline, and then move it into
so interesting
page structure.
Very cool. And one thing I really like about what Anna did, and I think this template's a little bit different, but here we go. This is something I really love that she did, is she actually put in this hashtag and then whatever the topic is, just as part of the text. Because one of the nice things about a table, as you know, John, is it's a little bit more searchable. You can do more filtering. Text is a little bit more static. But by including this little hashtag, anytime you want to search for the name of that feature, you can just do hashtag feature, and it'll show you everywhere that it shows up, which I think is a really creative way that she's put this together. The other thing I do love about what she did that I think is very unique to this, and that I think everybody who's making a knowledge base should do, is creating a glossary. So here she's made it a table with the term, whatever hashtags it has associated with it, the description, and you can add new terms. But this then means that when you are writing something, you could just type at and then that term, and it'll show up the full definition. So it creates this really powerful kind of dictionary Wikipedia type approach. And John, I think that's something you've started recommending that most people do in the knowledge hubs that you're building with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even internally, it's a funny reminder. People are like, oh my gosh, I never thought about using Coda like that.
Totally.
Have you made a glossary before? Or
I have. Yeah, and it's something that recently here at Coda, what we did is we went through all of the words that we use to describe our product, and I was on the word processor NounFest team, and we actually used that same logic in our own Coda glossary so that we could then reference it elsewhere. We could try it out in a sentence, like how do all of these words sound in a sentence, which is really valuable. Also, welcome to everybody just joining us now. This is just our open office hours. So John and I are just kind of hanging out here chatting about knowledge hubs, but our primary job is to make sure you leave with your questions answered. So please let us know if you've got a question, if you're curious about something, if you are struggling with something in your knowledge hub, if you're not quite sure how to apply a solution to your knowledge hub, that's why we're here. Otherwise, John and I will just kind of talk for a little bit, and then it won't be as fun as if you let us know what's going on. So please feel free, use the ask a question button along the bottom of the screen, or over there on the right, we're a small group today, so that chat field is available for you at any point in time. Just pop it on over into there. So this one, I think, is the thing I like about it is if you're using like a Confluence or very much like a text-based wiki, I feel like this model works really, really well. John, any other thoughts on this particular template before we take a look at the next one?
Well, actually, what I was doing is I was checking out our brand wiki and the dictionary that's in that. Do you think this is open to be able to share? I'd love to demo it.
I think it's probably fine. Yeah, let me go ahead and close the video because it's just words. Go for it.
This is okay. Let's go into Go Brand.
Beautiful. Looks perfect.
Awesome. So actually, this is something that I've started seeing other clients who use Go links doing, is putting like a Go link short name for their docs to be able to easily find it, or like in an all hands when you're launching a doc to have folks easily be able to find it instead of this gnarly URL right here.
Lots to memorize.
So much. So this is, and I don't know, Maria, is it shown it anywhere else? The app mentioning, it'd be cool to call out. But yeah, here's the dictionary. Oh, it looks like people are app mentioning different like nouns in here. Row modal.
Yeah.
It goes between like fun brand things and kind of like nerdy detailed product stuff in here.
Yeah. It allows us to make connections, right? Like, oh, when you use this word, you're probably also really interested in these things. Or it allows us to make a distinction, right? What is the difference between a doc versus a template? And notice it just allows you to put in any amount of information in that inclusion. So if we think about the struggle that Anna was having, do I have all my articles in rows or do I have all my articles in pages? You can kind of do a blend, right? You can have the articles that are more of a page, but then you can have some structured information that you know you're going to use in a bunch of different places, just put in as that @ symbol to be able to mention it elsewhere. So this was a really fun project that we actually all did internally here.
I love how it's also a project, like it's project management, like you're reviewing the nouns and you're discussing them and you're flagging it. So it's just really cool.
Yeah, and we actually were able to do a lot of this asynchronously. So this was one of the things that, Coda has been around for, let's see, 2015 is when it started. I don't know. It's been around for about 5 years. So a lot of the words that we're using, the product has evolved. We're adding new elements to the product every day. So we wanted to take a look at, well, how are we using the words? And let's make sure that we're being really clear about what everything's called so that it's easy for folks to be able to stay in touch. And what we then did is we had a group of folks, because we're all distributed, and we would say, all right, every week we're going to review 5 of these nouns. And before the meeting, you'd open up the row and you'd add any questions or comments or adjustments that you think should be made. And then we would just discuss those in the meeting itself. And then we'd mark them off and lock them when we'd completed it. So we're able to make a lot of changes there in that way as well. Yeah. So a fun kind of blend.
It's about row modal on a row modal. That's great.
I know, very meta. Blah. Yeah, cool. And that Go brand is an example of a team wiki, right? That our brand team has put that together with all of the guidelines around which colors to use, how to talk about things. So you can think about these at the company level with things like policies, your employee handbook kind of stuff, but then also what is the more detailed kind of double click that each team might need to be able to communicate their team's purpose or the identity or how to do things or regulations, as well as having that as a workspace for everybody else, which I think is really great. Oh yeah, this is one of my favorite things because so much of what we started doing is visual. Our brand team is like, let's just make it really easy for people to know exactly what to get to. And I love the download the PDF option. Thank you, attachments. That's something we couldn't do in December. Very cool.
Actually.
And then new cards here as well. This is the other thing I think is so great.
Oh, cool. So you can preview it too. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, look at those cards and downloading.
And I would say the downloading option is really valuable for those of you who've got a lot of physical documentation living elsewhere. And you're like, I got to bring it all into my Knowledge Hub. This is overwhelming. You can start by just adding those attachments so that the hub can become the hub to the spokes. And then you can start to add and adjust and transition over time. So it's a great way to kind of have that interim option there as well.
Love to hear the background story on tomato soup.
I know. I was telling Laura, one of our brand folks, that I would like to eat everything but 2 on that there. Don't want to eat the emerald. Maybe peony is not a good idea to eat, but everything else I would totally take.
Can I flight this to name it?
I know, right? We should change it to kale and salmon, and then we'd have a really great little menu there. Excellent. Just a reminder, folks, do let us know what your questions are. Otherwise, we can't help you in the way that we'd love to. So please let us know what's on your mind. If you've got a Knowledge Hub you're trying to build, that's part of why we're here. You can pick John's brain, which is something that is super, super cool. All right, let's take a look at another Knowledge Hub. This time, we're going to take a look at the central station for, this is by Elia, who is another one of our fabulous makers. And what I think is really interesting about this is kind of like the brand wiki that we just saw with John. This was, in this case, Elia's product team at PandaDoc. And he wanted to have a place where everything could be really, really clear on what the product team was working on. Number one, so that the product team knows what they're working on. But number two, so that they can communicate it out more readily, more easily to everybody else in the company. Because we all know that being interrupted with those little questions throughout the day ends up having a really big productivity dump, right? So Ilya put this all together as a way to kind of be the central station for the product team. Now, what I think is really interesting about what Ilya did is he made this about time, right? That we think about, what are we trying to do for the year? Then what are we trying to do for the quarter? Then what are we doing for 2-week sprints? And then what are we doing every single week? So it allows him and his team to go from big to small and kind of let everybody go as deep as they want to, right? Maybe I just want to know, like, what are our priorities for the year? Just so I can understand what the product team is going for. Notice it's very much text focused here. Then we could say, well, I want to know what major priority number 1 is, and I can jump right to that spot. So then maybe I'm like, all right, I get what the year is doing, but what about this quarter? I need to know what I can communicate to my clients, to my prospects about what we're doing. So we've just got the element of the business, and then the objective, key results popped in there, and then the status here and who's responsible. So a pretty straightforward table here. Now, John, I know you also work with our customers a lot on setting up appropriate OKRs, right?
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about how this is maybe the same or different to what you see with other customers using this for OKRs in particular?
Sure. So what's interesting about OKRs is there's often the split between like brainstorming and communicating through words and having a very like loose and light structure that you often see in documents, and then translating those into something you can track quarter over quarter. So there's almost always a split of, we start in a doc and then we go to a sheet or a spreadsheet, and then eventually we put it into an app to manage it. I love how he's like brought and wrangled that all into one Coda doc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing I think is really neat about what they've done is just putting this idea of a place for an update, right? That this is a spot that people can just put, here's the most recent thing you need to know about what's happening with this particular OKR. And then he's just built in a little lookup column to connect the OKRs together. So great, we've got the quarter, and we did a little nice collapsible content here. This is just a collapsible list with all the details and some color coding, and then some really great formulas here letting you know how far we're going. Now, the other thing that Ilya said is that sometimes there's not necessarily an OKR, but there is an initiative, right? We want to share a little bit more about our general focus or our themes, right? And that's what we've got going on here. It allows to add a little more context, letting you know the stage it's at, as well as some links to further documentation, which can be really helpful. Again, thinking about the attachments we were talking about before, you can do the same thing with links to information as well.
Yeah.
So we've got our quarter, but then it's the sprints, right? Product teams generally work in an agile methodology, as did Ilya's team. So great, we've got our quarterly goals, but what are we doing in this 2-week sprint? What are we committing to? And it allows, again, to just link back up to that previous area, choose the sprint that you're in, and be able to see exactly what you need to focus on, how you're doing, where it's at. And then the other thing I think is great is that Ilya's team uses Jira. So they've linked it up to Jira using the Jira pack as well. Then, of course, every week holds something new as well. So they've built in this wonderful little weekly tracker where you can just put in, what is this week's update? What is last week's update? And then you could say, oh, you know what? We're not doing it in this sprint, but let's add it to the next one. And this handy thing actually populates the formula up at the top with that major quarterly OKR to see all of the last updates. So I think it's really neat that Ilya's really thought about this time and then how each of those parts of the process link together. John, any other thoughts here on this particular wiki? Again, a little bit different because it's very, very tactical for this particular team and how they do their business. Any thoughts on it?
Yeah, one of the biggest conversations that I had with Ilya was one doc, multiple docs, like what does the ecosystem look like around here? So it was actually something that we didn't cover during the first webinar, which could be fun for us to talk about on this one. If we head up to quarter initiatives, there's a column within that table called IRD. I usually hear them as PRDs or product requirement documentation, but they call it initiative. So I for initiative instead of feature or product. So if you click on that, it actually links to Ilya's other published doc. And it's
Ooh.
a template that they've put in as a custom template within the PandaDoc workspace. And all PMs have to do is click, okay, I want to start a new IRD, and it has all of the technical documentation like templatized for them to start filling out.
So great. I had no idea. This is so neat. Yeah, and what I think is really interesting here is that if you think about doing business and being productive, so much of it is, can we reduce the amount of time where we do the same thing, right? Can we make those things that are repeatable a lot faster, right? Because I could go ahead and type this up every single time, but I might forget something, or I might, have to, enter it all in over again, or spend a ton of time copy pasting. You just can copy this particular doc, and everyone can have that standardization. The other thing I want to call out, and I think it's not necessarily a Coda feature, but it's something I think is a Coda feature, is that this idea of something as simple as labeling, right? Because if I were to have some out-of-the-box project management software, I might have to call these things PRDs because that's what the software labels it as, right? But here I can say, no, this is our term. Same thing for the stages, right? Ilya's team has a very specific set of stages. There's many here. And he and his team can actually choose whatever they want to call it. It doesn't have to be anything else. And I think just the power of labeling things the way that you want can be so valuable. John, any other thoughts on this based on the work that you did with Ilya on this doc, or any other kind of bright ideas?
It's funny that you're talking about stages and like PandaDoc's unique way of having stages, because that was another conversation that we had. I was like, are you sure? So Ilya's the head of product ops over there. I was like, are you sure, Ilya, that you want like 10 different stages to go through the system development life cycle? He's like, of course, we're like meticulous. We care about all this reporting. I'm like, okay, cool. That's the way that you all work. That's your culture. Whereas other teams that I've worked with, it's like 4 stages is pushing it. So it's cool to see the difference between orgs.
Totally. And I think this is the other thing I just encourage everybody to do is, however you and your team do it, that's how you should be doing it, right? You don't have to do it a special different way. If you want to call things certain elements, do it. If you want to have people columns, do it. It's really about what you and your team need, and getting as close as possible to that is really the best way forward. Also, I just want to call out, look at all of the subpages that we have going on here, right? Where we can document all of this great stuff everywhere along the way, so that if people want to go deeper, they can, right? Very cool.
That's kind of how they're grouping the stages as well. Like, for example, if you go to the launch phase, beta release and internal release are both stages that show up in there. So they've basically taken all of these R stages and said, okay, in ideation, we're going to have like 3 stages on this filter for like this cut of information. So I kind of like that approach of balancing between stages and pages.
Totally. And this is just a simple filter of that same big old table. In this case, just filtered by internal release or beta release. Very cool. And that's just pulling from their stages they've made up. Love that. So now let's take a look at another. Oh, were you going to say something, John? Sorry, I might have interrupted you.
That's everything from that doc guy. I really like it.
Cool.
Actually, it's 2 docs, really. It's like the core central hub, and then all of these little IRDs off of it. Love it.
Yeah. And then, of course, if I was somebody who worked on Ilya's product team, we could then add more pages here, right? I could say, oh, I want to add more pages for some of the other things we're doing on this, so that we can, again, have it grow, but still have that structure. Cool. So now let's take a look at 2 different, I would think of these as a little bit more traditional company wikis. They're at that kind of macro level, everybody in the company, what do we need to know? So this is by Angela, and Angela works at Mode, which is a really wonderful data analytics company. And what she and her company needed to do is they're like, all right, we're getting bigger, we're growing quickly. We need to have a way for everybody to know kind of what's going on, level set, but we don't want it to be overwhelming. And we also, everybody's got other jobs. We can't have to be a full-time job. So Angela's got a great write-up with how she sort of thinks about what this means, how it fits in with her company. But there's a couple things to note. So the first is this idea of the homepage. And this is very much, how can we just make sure that everybody knows what we're here to do and what our values are? It also links out to all of these wonderful other pages too, and gives a little bit of some details of like, hey, if you're new, here's how to get started. Particularly if we think about ramping people up when they are all remote, how can we do that really easily? Also, even though John and I are continuing to talk, please do let us know if you have any questions. Post it over there to chat or along the bottom of the screen at Ask a Question. Either works for us. Just let us know what you're looking for. And even though this seems like a pretty straightforward, simple effort, I think there's something really valuable, though, to just having it documented, right? Particularly if we're not sharing the same space where we don't have all those cultural artifacts that we might already have. So a really nice way to just make sure everybody knows, what are we doing here and why do we exist? Then I love what she did here. She actually took something really important about their product, which is data. They're very interested in data, managing it, understanding it, and actually just embedded mode reports into their company wiki so that everybody could know, how are we doing on our ARR? How many customers do we have? And pulling in all of the charts that are really valuable. And this is actually something that John and I and our company do here at Coda. We embed our mode charts as well, various places. Now, the next thing then she wanted to do is she wanted to make it a place for people to have an opportunity to add their own team information, but not kind of force anyone to do anything that they didn't kind of need to do. She wanted to balance this idea of autonomy and structure. So she just created these wonderful little subpages where people could go ahead and put in the basic details about their team. You know, what are the goals we're working on? What is our sort of one-liner about who we are? But then allows them to just really make it as involved as they like. Yeah. And then lastly, there's a bunch of other really great things here, which my favorite, honestly, is this media and communications area. So one thing that I think is super cool that Angela put together here is this all hands meeting area. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And what it is it allows you to see all of the past meeting recordings in the archive, which is just a very simple table with links to those recordings for each of those meetings that people can come and take a look at. And then also the recordings linked out in their Dropbox, and then the ability for people to submit questions or appreciations. So a way to kind of say, hey, I'd like to submit a question to leadership to answer in our next all hands, or I'd like to just commit a thanks and letting people know what's going on. And even though this is probably the simplest part of this doc, Angela talked about how this is the most trafficked because it's super valuable, right? Everybody can get value from this. And if you're thinking about building your own knowledge hub or wiki, it can be really great to just think about what is the first thing that can give people something really valuable, even if it's small, and start there. Now, John, I know you and Angela work together on this doc pretty heavily. Any thoughts or reflections on this really great setup that she's put together here?
Specifically around the all hands meetings, we've been back and forth on like, should we integrate with the Zoom pack to like pull down the recordings automatically? Like, should we add more columns? But it's funny, we just keep on landing on 3 columns, simple table, and it's just easy. It's easy and simple. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's really important, that sometimes it can be so tempting to like add every single thing, but sometimes all you need is 3 columns, and that actually does the job perfectly well. Notice Angela also has a glossary here, so kind of like what we saw with Anna's doc, the ability to then reference these terms everywhere. I also really like that she's included this category, right? Like, oh, is this an internal term that's just us? Is this something that is about our company culture? Is this just an external term? It allows everybody to really understand kind of where it fits when you're learning that new language of the business. And we got a great little filter here, which is pretty great. The other thing that I think is really key to a company wiki in the more traditional sense is this how we work, particularly thinking about all the tools that might be very unique to how you and your business get work done. So being able to say, here's how we use Slack here. And this is actually pulled from a really great blog post from them as well. And then here's how we use Zoom here, our meeting guidelines. So this is all about documenting those norms, those rituals that you and your business have so that everybody, no matter if they're brand new day one or been there for a long time, can really lean on how we work together. John, any other thoughts on this particular company wiki doc here, the central station?
I'm actually curious about your own team's wiki. Do you have like a how section or like an expectations? I feel like our solution brand partnership marketing is quite a mouthful. Team has really good norms and rituals around that.
We do. I'm so glad you bring it up. So we actually, because our team did a whole reorg maybe about 6 or 7 months ago, we were a bunch of smaller pods of 1 or 2 folks who were doing kind of separate things that were all kind of connected. And then we all put us under one roof. So as part of that process of going under one roof, we spent a lot of time really figuring out, okay, so who are we? What are we responsible for? What is everybody's jam? Did a lot of planning in that doc, and also documented a lot of expectations, not only about how we want to work together, but also documenting our own preferences, right? Like, hey, me, Maria, I really like to do things. This is how I like to do my communications. I don't check Slack after 5 p.m. Pacific. I don't check Slack on the weekends. I don't do email at those times either. Please feel free to send them to me. Just I won't be responding until the next day during business hours. And the purpose was that impetus of like, okay, we need to figure out who we are. And we've all been doing things independently. So what does this mean when we're in a group? Which I really enjoy. And we have all of our OKRs in there as well as all of our meeting notes. So we've really consolidated everything into one primary doc, our wiki piece. Yeah.
Very cool. So you have like a user's guide to Maria.
Yes. Hey, and I will say, distributing a user guide for how you work can make such a difference, right? Because people don't know unless you tell them, right? And the fact that we all have different styles is only an impediment if we don't document it, right? How about the customers team? How do you all organize your team wiki?
So ours is interesting. It's actually designed more around the other people than ourselves up front. So it's about how design and PMs and other orgs can see the clients we're talking with and join client calls. Yeah. So it's almost like we have a Google Calendar pack which then pulls down all of our meetings. People can like sign up and join those calls. And that's like the most actively used part of our doc, even though that like some customers aren't actively in it, just everyone else in Coda is in that section. And then we have things like our meetings. Right now, actually, most of tomorrow I have blocked off to write through all of our like plays and motions for how we think about our go-to-market and our client interactions and how we like partner with clients from the moment they sign up all the way through like a 3 to 5 year old client. So that's a lot of what I'm doing now, which is it's sort of like a knowledge base meets how-to articles. I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're hitting on something really important, that kind of knowledge base is a little bit, the boundaries of it are very flexible, right? Mm-hmm. That it's really, what is the knowledge or the process that we need to preserve, right? What do we need to be able to know in a click, right? For Ilya's team, it's where are we in our roadmap? It's what are we committing to? What was the last update? For you, it's okay, how do we make sure that everybody in the business can connect with us around our client communications? Yeah. For me and my team, it's what is all of our meeting notes? What is our projects about? And it's really about figuring out what is the most important thing to this group of people that they share, that we want to make sure we document, that is readily available no matter where we are, and that we can all be contributing to as things change, right? Which I think is that key flexibility piece there. John, do you have is your team's wiki mostly tables or mostly text?
It's half and half. It like for example, the plays and motions for like what we do with client interactions. It started as a table, then we realized that we actually need to write how-to articles for each. So we're like mentioning and linking in between the two. We're testing out some new plays as well. So that's on like a backlog, a sort of like Kanban board of projects. So similar to that Noun Fest project is a combination of a source of truth, but we're also like always iterating and building that source of truth. So it's kind of like
time. Yeah, and I think you're bringing up a really key point, which is we're always iterating, right? Yeah. Even for things that feel very fixed. And we need to make sure that we keep iterating and keep responding. Otherwise, it's going to lose its value and we're going to stop using it, right? If it stops being valuable, it's not doing its job. It's just a waste. Yeah. Right on.
Actually, the Panadoc and the Bright Insight one we'll see shortly. Both of their home pages and landing pages call out like, this is a living and breathing doc. Please put in comments. If you see things wrong, add to it. So I don't think in the published versions they call that out in the landing page, but in the real docs they call it out.
Yeah. Let's see. I think so this is Bright Insight, and this is a a full company wiki. So I think something really interesting about what Angela's team did is they decided to not put everything in this particular wiki. They wanted to keep it a little bit more stripped down to have it always be usable. And the way that Angela talks about it, it's like a central station where people are coming in and out, going to a bunch of different places, right? So in this case, the Bright Insight one is much more kind of a full company wiki. Notice over on the side, we've got a company directory with every single person. You can then add a personal profile in here and say, oh, my name is Ria Marquis. Feel free to ask me about my dog, Ned. My non-role, I guess this would technically be my non-role. Please feel free to ask me about this. For my role, talk to me about presentations, and this would be Ned. Working preferences, this is Slack only. Outside of work, off hours. I can then add a photo and my birthday in here. So we developed this full area where we can just go and see, who are all of these folks? I want to be able to get to know them a little bit better, which I think is really helpful for a distributed teams, particularly now that distributed is lasting for a really long time. But then we've got all of our policies, things to know, all of our departments where people can connect, resources, which what I love about this is there's a crowdsourcing element where everybody can add questions and then upvote and downvote to know like where we should be adding new things. And then the other thing I love is this just for new hires, that they created a full area to be their wiki for when you're new so that you can onboard remotely with this handy little checklist, see everything that you're doing, having all the materials that you need with links to all of them so you can never get lost. And then a special place for the new hires to be able to say, here's advice for other people, here's suggestions for how the process can get better. And I also love that she's just built in a whole feedback area. So here's where people can say, I want to have feedback on this particular wiki and be able to start to grow it in that way as well. So I think it's neat that for something that has a lot of documentation, Van An has actually built in a lot of options for people to interact with that information using things like buttons, voting, all sorts of good stuff here. John, as you were working with Vanna to help her realize this and make it come into fruition, what are some of the thoughts that you have about this particular wiki?
So this one is uniquely different from the Mode team, I think, because of the people who are building it. So Angela's the EA to the CEO and is working with like C-suite and kind of plugged into that group, whereas Van An is part of BizOps. And they're able to see like every employee is almost like a user that they're trying to design for. So it's really cool in the Bright Insight Wiki how much it's designed around like the user experience of having inputs for what should be designed, and then like this constant iteration and feedback loop that you're getting from them. It's very like implementation, almost like product development life cycle, whereas the Mode one's a little bit more organic and like, here's your space, do what you want, please update it. But this one's very like methodical. At the end of Q2, we're going to have like a wiki that looks like this. So it's very, very different.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good call. It is like what works culturally, right? Like, is my culture the type of culture who wants a lot of rigidity or a lot of like, here's exactly what we're doing and when we're doing it? Or is my culture looking for a little bit more wiggle room and blend, right? Because we are all successful in different ways. And also kind of what's your intention for this wiki, right? What do you need from it? And how can you make sure that you set it up in that way as well, which I think is neat. But again, like the key here is that all of these wikis have a very different intention, right? This is the full documentation of our entire company brain. This is a company wiki that's meant for those quick touch points. This is a wiki for a team that is looking for that product management solution and understanding where they are in time and how everything's connected. And this is a wiki that is about how do we really train people on a specific process to support our customers. And even though all of them have that different intention, notice they're using the same building blocks every single time, right? All of them are using pages and nested pages. All of them are using some kind of table as well as some text. All of them are really thinking about how do we reference information. All of them are using buttons to be able to allow people to contribute. And all of them are using things like conditional formatting to give meaning to content by applying some color to them. And most of them are using packs, connecting Coda to the other tools that they use every day. And really what I take away from this is that it's about finding the right solution for the problems that are uniquely yours and really being able to build and adjust and respond to how you and your team do business. John, any other sort of thoughts here? Also, folks, do let us know what questions you have. That's about everything that John and I wanted to share with you all. So if there's any questions, let us know. We're here to help you and support you. John, any other sort of thoughts as we kind of wind down our wiki conversation here today?
Well, I really love your recap around building blocks, because it's funny, as I was going through and building these with each of them, you see and you notice building blocks, but when you're like rapidly going in between every example and you realize like, oh, they've all implemented pages in similar ways, and they're at mentioning information in pages from different spaces, and like they're putting in buttons to make it more fun and interactive for their users. Like the reasons they're doing them is really similar, but the use cases are totally different on like kind of like how it plays out.
Too cool, so cool. All right. Well, it looks like
I'll drop this.
Questions have. Oh yes, please do. Looks like questions have come to an end. So we can close out for today. But like I said, John has posted links to all of the templates over there on the right side of the screen. So you can go ahead and take and steal and copy. Definitely recommend that you do. It's a great way to just get those great things and like put them into your docs and start playing, as well as the building blocks review. Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. John, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your brilliance with me. I always love when we get a chance to hang out, particularly since even back in the before times, we were always at separate offices, you up north and me down here in the south. And that's always a great pleasure to be able to work with you. If anybody has any questions, please do let us know by going to community.coda.io. I'll pop that over there into chat for you. And we wish you all the best as you're building out those wikis. And when you have something you like, let us know. We'd love to celebrate makers, and we'd love to be able to shout your successes from the rooftop or support you if you're ever struggling.